This is the 27th of January, 2015. And our topic is the aftermath of the November 2014 congressional and governor's races throughout the nation, but particularly in Ohio. And my interrogator is Jeff Risner, who sits on the Democratic City Council. And I am Robert Whaley, retired historian at Ohio University. And this is Athens Speakout, number 320. And I have a minor question for Jeff. Do you want to review why John Kasich won big in the state of Ohio on the 4th of November? Do we have any remaining questions about that?
Not really. He ran a tight professional campaign as opposed to his opponent who basically self-destructed somewhere in the middle of it. Kasich had the financial backing of all the major players, and he out-advertised and outspent and he basically out-campaigned his opponent. Kasich, for everything I may say derogatory about him, is a professional politician, and he knows how to run a campaign. So.
No doubt about that. He
doubt.
had 9 terms in Congress, and he worked in Wall Street for Lehman Brothers, and he had a little stay at Fox Channel as a pundit, and he was a good speaker.
Yep. He's polished.
And he defeated the previous incumbent, Ted Strickland, which is hard to do.
Yes. Yeah.
But he won that race, and then this was his re-election.
So that's all I have to say about it.
Okay, I don't have anything more to say about it. I think neither one of us voted for him.
I know it.
But we were against overwhelming odds. Now, there were two consolation prizes. We had an issue 7, in which Athens County voted to ban fracking. And it was at least a consolation victory.
Well,
it remains to be seen whether the state will
well,
do anything about it.
Not Athens.
It was a gesture.
Yeah, not Athens County. It was the city of Athens.
The city of Athens,
And,
right. Thank you for that correction.
Right. It's not the county. They whatever the county does, they're
not
do.
well informed, and they're making money.
Right. But it was
lots of environmentalists in the city.
Yes, and it was an overwhelming victory. It was not a marginal by any means. We were hoping to get 60%, and we get 87% of the vote.
Yeah, and the other consolation prize is that we re-elected Debbie Phillips, who is outstanding for Ohio's education and the education of her district, which covers 3 counties.
That's correct.
A little bit of a township in Vinton. So that was a good consolation prize for the Democratic Party. Okay, do you want to say anything further about the representative race? How we lost on the 15th district, and Jeff Stivers won, and the Democrat had no showing at all.
Well, that's...
That was no victory for the Democrats.
Absolutely not, no. Well, you take our district, which is gerrymandered to death. It goes all the way to Franklin County and back from here. So you're bound to be able to marginalize any Democrats who are going to try to run for office.
And of course, Stivers was the incumbent.
He was incumbent. He was extremely well financed compared to his challenger,
who was an airline pilot.
Farmer, and so on. But against that, though, Stivers, I believe, at the moment is involved in Congress on an issue I think is of extreme importance to America and something that he's extremely well qualified to handle. That issue that I think is so important is the fact that it is now costing more to produce a penny than
Oh,
it's
yeah, I've heard
actually
that.
worth.
Yeah, I don't think it's an important issue, but it's an issue.
Well, to him, it's extremely important. I've read his comments, and he's working diligently to solve this crisis. And I really believe he's going to find a solution.
This is inside humor.
To this major problem that America is facing. We don't have a crisis in education. We have no crisis in employment. We have no crisis in the world. But we do have a crisis with our pennies.
You know, this thing could be solved in about 30 seconds.
Of course it could.
In World War II, we had little plastic chips for ration things. Yeah. You put a red chip and a blue chip in order to get meat.
That's right. Yeah.
So you could make pennies made out of plastic.
You could. It's a daunting problem. But one I feel that he's more than qualified to handle.
Well, maybe he has some investments in the copper business.
Not possible. Steel.
Maybe he's
Zinc,
watching the stock market very carefully.
There we go. Penny stocks are valuable.
Okay, so I want to get now to a new theme. How did Mitchell McConnell, senator from Kentucky, who was then the minority leader in the last Congress, in the 113th Congress, and is now the majority leader in the 114th Congress. How did he win big?
Well, let me ask you that. That's
yeah, I guess you were supposed to ask me that.
Well, actually, there's a question before that.
Okay, go ahead.
That I have here. Can you continue your story of the transition in the years 64 through 72?
That's where we left off.
From academia to politics. We didn't finish that.
Yeah, we kind of got involved on that, and then the television went off.
That's right.
I'm trying to pick up that scene. What happened was that in 1964 was a decisive year in the career of Lyndon Johnson, because in August he decided to escalate the Vietnam War. I was still teaching at the University of Maine at that time, although in the summer I was down in Washington doing work on my PhD, and I read in the Washington Post that Lyndon Johnson had bombed North Vietnam, destroyed 90% of its oil supply in retaliation for a PT boat attack on two destroyers, the Turner Joy and the Maddox.
You're referring to the Gulf of Tonkin?
This was called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, and it was Walter Rastow that drew it up ahead of time. I didn't know much about Rastow at that time. He was hidden, from my opinion. But this later became political news. This resolution was discussed in the following years until Johnson was retired in '68. But in 64, just by reading the news and knowing something about international law, I knew it was a phony story. You can't retaliate for an event that didn't happen.
Yes. That's what we've discovered since then. Yes.
And the reports from the American destroyers were defective. And I can't remember in history where the minor side attacks the major side. Destroyers don't attack aircraft carriers.
PT boats don't go.
PT boats don't attack destroyers.
No.
So that thing was just not believable.
No.
But it took in the mass media and the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal and all of the big media. And Fulbright was taken in by it. Fulbright was chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations. Well, he said this is just a phony thing in order to defeat Goldwater's campaign. Nothing will come of it.
Yes.
Once the election is over, because he was sure that Johnson was going to win and Goldwater was going to lose. So just forget about it. It was
That's right. Yeah.
Good. But anyway,
yes.
As soon as spring opens and Johnson's in power, In February of '65, he escalates the war big. And eventually, Fulbright regrets that he ever endorsed that, because the vote was 88-2. And there was one international lawyer who could see through it. He was the governor, he was the senator from Oregon. And he had been the president of the University of Oregon, and he had been a national lawyer. And he knew that that thing was just totally phony.
Right.
And then he had a friend up in Alaska. So there were two votes, the Oregon vote and the Alaska vote. And they voted no. Well, eventually, Senator Morse, who was this hero, and Senator Greening started the campaign for first Eugene McCarthy and then McGovern, and this went all the way to Nixon's administration.
Right.
Can we repeal this phony resolution, which instead of declaring war, gave the president authority to take any military action he may see fit in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
And we still have that problem with the present incumbent, Obama.
Right.
And before him, we had George Bush, 43,
Yeah.
who didn't learn anything from Vietnam. And now somebody in Congress is beginning to say, well, the next time Congress should declare war before we send any more boys overseas in unwinnable wars. So that resolution, I was ahead of the curve. So anyway, I did not vote for Lyndon Johnson in November. I threw my vote away as a protest vote to a Socialist Party. And then I came to Ohio University, and everybody was cheering for Johnson. And everybody's surprised. Well, where's your vote? I said, well, I voted in Maine. And I thought I would get at least a consolation. And I wrote back to my friends in Maine, well, I wanted to see, there were 7 votes in Orono, Maine, that voted for this socialist. Well, you see, I was disillusioned with that too. Because when you have third-party candidates, the 2 major parties don't count the votes and just throw them in the basket.
That's right.
So it was never recorded. My vote was never recorded even as a protest vote in Maine.
Right.
Because the Socialist Labor Party was on the ballot in Maine.
Yeah.
So I decided that a third-party protest was a lost cause, because it is a fixed horse race.
It is, yeah.
So I voted for all the Democrats since. Anyway, that was the
So that got you to
that was one of my transits. So anyway, when I came to Athens, I began to write letters to the editor in the Athens Messenger. How this, and I was the only dove on the faculty at that point. Who's daring attack Lyndon Johnson, the overwhelmed victor? Okay.
Yes,
Oh no. So I wrote one letter after another. And pretty soon, there developed nationwide the teach-in movement. This began at California. It's called the Free Speech Movement. And then at Michigan, I think Tom Hayden changed the name to a teach-in. And he started talking about, and then the committees were set up. The committee against the escalation of the war. And then Yale, Columbia, all kinds of universities started protesting this. And then we had our first teach-in at Ohio University in 1966, a little bit later. But it was my letters to the editor which helped get that off the ground. And we had an Ohio University committee against the war. And we went around trying to press doorbells and getting some votes for Eugene McCarthy, who was a lost cause. But anyway, that got my feet wet. And then in 1972, this Eugene McCarthy committee changed its name into the McGovern campaign.
Yes, right.
And I just decided to run for Congress, which was an educational vote. I had no chance to win. But the theory was, and the designer of this program is still living in Athens. His name is David Horn, and his wife is a great Quaker. And the idea was that I would go around to the 12 counties in the district and for the McGovern, you had to elect 5 delegates because it was based on the 10th Congressional District. Well, it gave us, that is the McGovern Committee, a separate speaker because I could say, I'm running for Congress, but I'm also supporting McGovern.
That's right.
So I was hitchhiking on the McGovern campaign. And McGovern lost by about 30% to 70% nationally. And I was the only candidate in the United States who did worse than McGovern, 27% of the vote. But I didn't spend much money. I raised $4,500 by going around getting $5 bills, $20 bills. And then I lost $500 of my own expenses.
Now, who was your opponent at that time?
Clarence Miller,
Clarence
who was a
Miller.
well-established
Oh, yes.
fixture from the American Power. He had plenty of money.
Oh, yeah.
He got more money in one contribution from the American Medical Association than I had in the whole campaign. He didn't have to spend any money.
No.
That was his great victory.
That's right.
And then he could take polls. They said, "How do you stand in the polls?" Well,
I don't know. I
he had 73% of the vote in the polls because he had his own house trailer, and then he selected the questions. How do you stand on gun control? Well, I vote against gun control.
Oh, you bet.
I agree with 73% of the district. But he didn't take any polling on the war. He didn't have the question, do you want to escalate, de-escalate, or continue? No, he just had a kind of a thing about the veterans. Yeah, we always support the military.
Oh, yeah.
Well, anyway, it was a fun campaign for me as an amateur. And I learned about politics. I had exaggerated the importance of ideas and ideology and greatly underestimated the importance of money.
Yes.
So when it was over, some Democrats wanted me to run again. And I immediately resigned. I will not be a candidate in the next race. Though I gave advice in the 74 election, the 76 election, to other amateurs.
Yes.
I took them around as a kind of a buddy to the 12 counties and introduced them to people.
Right, right.
Gave them some moral support.
There you go. Well, that's...
And that's how I met Sofrenic, by the way.
Oh, I see.
Sofrenic ran for, he was a fan of mine in the 72 race.
I see.
He was a young lawyer from
He was over in Morgan County.
Morgan County.
Yeah.
And I had to go up to the Morgan County and campaign.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, that's how you go from academia to politics.
Yeah, it's networking. You gotta...
But I retreated.
Yeah. Yeah, so...
You know, it was very interesting. There was one candidate in Congress that apparently followed my race.
Oh.
And I got an endorsement from a congressman.
No kidding.
It wasn't from a governor because he was too busy with his own
Right.
problems. But I got a letter of congratulations from Hubert Humphrey,
I'll be darned.
who must have gone down through all of the ballots, and he said, well, I hope you run again. You had your experimental race. And so
Right, right.
I put that letter in the file, but that was a kind of a...
Wow, from Hubert Humphrey. I'll be
It was because I was campaigning against Hubert Humphrey.
Yeah, one time.
We were trying to get the delegate votes to go for McGovern. But he was a politician.
Oh, yeah.
Shook his hands, and he was always saying there's going to be another election.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that was the end of my short political career.
Well, yeah, you're still involved with politics. You're just...
In an amateur way.
Yes.
As I say, once you see the relationship, you see, I followed McGovern in great detail. I followed Morse and Fulbright. Once you see the relationship between the Senate and the ability to declare war or veto war and finance these presidents, you got to look at the whole ticket.
Yes.
House of Representatives, Supreme Court, all 50 states, and that's how Nixon and the Republican Party won so big. in 2012
Yeah.
because they follow all of the races all of the time. They campaign 24 hours a day, 365 days a year for every seat.
That's right.
And the Democrats always go for the big media.
Yeah.
They go for Hollywood, Washington Post, and they think that somehow or other, if you win television, you're going to win the presidency. And once you win the presidency, all of the congressmen will fall in line. Well, I hope
No,
this
yeah.
2014 election will wake some of these Democrats up. Hope they're a little bit sober now.
Well, you would think so, but the Republicans, well, I hate to use that word, actually, because...
Republicans?
Because it has morphed from what...
They are reactionaries. They're reactionary Republicans.
Well, if you think about, say, the Republican Party of Barry Goldwater, 1964...
Well, he was a reactionary.
He was, but compared to what that we have today, he's rather moderate.
Yeah, that's true.
So there was a different Republican Party at that time. That was, remember, Wendell Willkie, Tom Dewey.
Well, they believe in the two-party system.
They did, but they were the type of Republicans who they were in the Chamber of Commerce. They were basically urban professionals, doctors, lawyers, accountants, that sort of thing.
Well, you see, Roosevelt and Truman put them on the defensive.
Yes.
Keynesian economics put them on defensive.
But then it changed, probably starting maybe around the time of Nixon, 68, when the people that had the more ideologically conservative rich people who decided we need to change things. They bring in Nixon. Nixon is their front man for a while, but the big candidate that's going to be in the future is going to be Ronald Reagan, governor of California in 68.
The 1980 election was the ideological Republican Party.
Right. That was so they had been working for that, and as you say, they looked at the United States and they said, yeah, the Democrats do seem to be concentrating on what you're talking about. They're the big splash, the
big media.
Big media. Let's go for the State House.
That's right.
Let's start there. And what I find interesting about
that was Nixon's strategy, the Southern strategy.
Right. Is that?
But it was Reagan who paid it off ideologically.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But that is very akin to what you would find in a European political party, which has not traditionally been like what America has. America's parties, like Democrat, Republican, are more parties of convenience. You have interest groups who say, I have an interest I want to promote. Now, which of these parties that we have will promote my interest best? American Medical Association. I have something to promote. I want doctors to make lots of money. Now, what party is here that will deliver that to me? Republicans or Democrats? So both parties sort of try to get these people to come to them, and they decide, well, the Republican Party is the party of convenience for me. Now, in Europe, with political parties, that's not what you have. It's more ideology that's driving it. It's people who have very fundamental ideas about what a government should do, as opposed to America, where it's what can a party do for my interest group, not necessarily what should a government as a government should do. What I have been seeing in the past 30 years is this trend where the Republican conservative have become more dogmatic.
That's right, no question.
And when you start driving dogma with a tremendous amount of capital, you have an almost unbeatable combination. Now you have a core group of fanatics, and I have no other way to describe them. There's no other word in the dictionary that defines what you have. And you could have that in a Democrat Party too. You could have a group of fanatics who would always say, no, we got to vote this way. But once you have that core group who will always, always, always go to the polls and always, always, always vote, they'll always come out for you, and you give them tremendous amounts of money, then you are well on your way to taking over the government.
Well, you're saying that capitalism is changing into plutocracy.
Well,
and democracy is dying on the vine.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yes, no question about it. If you're an expert on German history, if you look at the Nazi Party when it was going, it never, ever captured more than 1/3 of
That's
the
right.
vote. Never. Now, of course,
That's right.
Now,
That's
of course, now Germany had a different structure of government.
Well, they had 7 parties.
You have multiple parties. It was a parliamentary system, and it was possible to fragment. But they were gaining a sizable, and they didn't even have a majority, but they had an extremely powerful minority backed by major industrials.
That's true.
The Krupps,
Right.
Krupp Steel and Industry,
Right.
the Benz Corporation,
Right.
The big chemical
I.G. Farben.
Bayer.
I.G. Farben.
I.G. Farben.
I.G. Farben.
Yeah,
you,
Farben.
you pronounce it the German way.
So they were able to move forward with that.
Yeah.
And the other parties just simply did not have that ideological will and strength to stand up to them. And of course, they didn't have the cash. It just wasn't there. So that's sort of where we're at. But if I'm getting to a point, and sometimes I wonder if I am, is that the problem that the Democrat Party has always had.
Not always.
Well,
since Ronald Reagan,
Well,
I
since
think.
Ronald Reagan, but it has been a party of coalition,
That's true.
and those coalitions tend to fragment in times of crisis. And that's what we're at. We're at a point where we have Democrats who say, well, I'm very liberal. And I don't see our party representing my liberal ideas. On the other hand, we have Democrats who well, let's call them blue dog Democrats. They're more financially conservative.
Yeah.
They say, well, we should be backing labor. We should be backing coal mining and oil production because that provides jobs and union jobs, that sort of thing. And they're saying, well, I don't see our party doing that. And then you have Democrats who are stuck in the middle saying, well, I'm again, what is it that the Democrat Party represents? Now, in the New Deal, it was very easy to say, what do we represent? In the Second World War, it was very easy. This is what we represent democracy. We're the last great hope. And even under Lyndon Johnson, during the Great Society movement, before he went crazy into Vietnam, you had an idea that government was positive, it was beneficial, that it was needed, necessary, it protected people. But I think one of the great tragedies you talk about Lyndon Johnson was he destroyed that faith in government. He made people.
But he did it accidentally. He didn't plan it.
No, absolutely not.
He got involved in Vietnam, but he didn't know why he was in Vietnam.
And
he inherited the anti-communist slogan.
That's right. And then he had to start lying.
And when it was all over, when he was retired, they asked, some journalist asked him, well, why were you continuing that war? And you could see he was losing. And he had a very simple answer.
Yeah.
He said, I had to keep that going because I didn't want to turn to the Washington Post and see that Lyndon Johnson just lost Vietnam. He wanted to forestall Nixon and Nixon's ideology because Nixon developed that thing. The Democrats lost China. Well, he didn't want to have Johnson lost Indochina. So he was fighting for a myth.
Yeah.
But he was sucked in for the myth because he came from Texas. He knew a lot about Senate, but he didn't know how international relations worked. He didn't have a foreign secretary. He inherited Dean Rusk from Kennedy.
Yeah.
He inherited this guy, Rostow, who thought that bombing would win.
Yeah, right.
Rostow was an economist who was charged in World War II to be a statistics man. Go to Germany and count how many times the Americans bombed and how did the U.S. Air Force destroy the German machine. So he came back with those statistics. He says, hey, Lyndon, if you bomb Hanoi, you'll win. The stupidity of it, Hanoi is not Düsseldorf. It's not Essen. It's not Berlin.
No, it doesn't make anything. We don't have a ball bearing
You can bomb the Ho Chi Minh Trail. What are you going to hit?
No.
Stupid.
Yeah.
They didn't have any geography. They didn't have any history.
No.
Now that's how Kissinger bailed Nixon out.
Yeah.
Because he understood the European balance of power. And he said, Nixon, the only way you can deal with Beijing and Moscow is to make them rivals, and you can't do that as long as you stay in Indochina
That's right.
on ideological grounds.
Yeah.
Once you get out, you can play politics,
Yeah.
just like Bismarck did.
That's right. Play the China card.
If you're gonna have a balance of power, you gotta go on that scale
That's right.
and be able to jump on that side or that side,
Yeah.
or stay in the middle.
Yeah.
You have three choices.
Well, that's why Obama's in India. He's playing the Indian card. against
Well,
the
he's
Chinese.
learned a little bit late public relations.
Yes.
A little bit late.
Uh-huh.
But when he started out, he was going to be the first African American. He didn't even want to be president of the United States. He wanted to be the African American.
Mm-hmm.
What was he running for? Emperor of the world? I just heard some nonsense today about diversity. More and more diversity. What's he want? Want to exterminate all the whites? Make it all colored?
Oh, I don't think so, no.
What was Obama's great ultimate objective? To prove that a black man could win the presidency. Well, he did.
Mm-hmm.
But couldn't rule the Pentagon. He couldn't rule CIA.
No.
He couldn't rule the Senate.
Mm-mm. No.
So he's fighting a lost cause.
No.
And he's polarized the races more than ever before. He put himself up as a target. So all of the whites came out from Ohio to Texas and voted against the image. No, he's not a good president of the United States.
Well, I'm not going to argue one or the other. I have my...
Well, I voted for him,
Yeah.
but I didn't have any confidence that he would succeed.
Mm-hmm.
I voted for him because he's better than McCain. Well, that's a very limited reason for voting for him. I voted for him because he was better than Mitt Romney,
Yeah.
but he didn't have any overall objective.
No.
And he still doesn't.
No.
He still doesn't know whether he wants to go to war in the Ukraine or in Iraq or Syria. He doesn't know how to handle the balance of power in the Middle East because he doesn't know anything about the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that is a problem. Anyway, moving along.
All right.
So let's get to, okay, we've got your transition done. So let's get a question two. Why did Senator Mitch McConnell, who is now the majority leader of the Senate of Kentucky, win big? Now, I don't know if he won that big. I mean, he certainly got a majority, but it wasn't 70-30 or even 60-40.
Well, he became majority leader.
Oh, majority leader, yeah. Well, oh, yes.
And there were 9 other Senate seats, so a total of 10 seats changed.
That's true. Okay, but not because of him.
Well, no, because of the Republican Party, because of the Nixon Party. They united.
Yes.
In other words, McConnell and Connally from Texas and Nixon and Reagan were all united to elect the party, not the personality.
Right.
And I don't think that, see, McConnell knows Kentucky, and Johnson knew Texas.
Yeah.
You have got to win the states because the Senate represents the state. And the president will follow the states ultimately. So what I'm saying is the National Republican Party is much better organized and much better financed than the Democratic National Party.
No question about it.
This goes back to Oklahoma. This goes back to Will Rogers. I don't belong to an organized party. I vote a Democrat.
I'm a Democrat, yes.
Famous joke.
Yes. No.
And I could see that in the McGovern campaign. McGovern was running against Muskie, Hubert Humphrey, Scoop Jackson.
Oh, Scoop, that's right, yeah.
Wallace. Each of those 7 candidates were running their own presidential campaign. Not for the party.
No, no.
And they couldn't compromise once McGovern got the nomination.
No.
they didn't rally around the name of end the war.
No.
They didn't have any consistent program.
No. Well,
it was divided into factions.
Well, today, the Republican Party met over the weekend in Iowa with the Koch brothers.
Well, now they're in trouble. Those candidates fell apart in what the 2012 election.
That's right. Yes.
They're 12 personalities going out for the ego trip.
Mm-hmm.
Now I don't know who the Republicans will nominate.
Mm-hmm.
They may have trouble. They may be just as fractured as the.
I don't know. It's going to be interesting to find out, isn't it? So.
Well, Mitt Romney wants to run again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, more power to him.
So he seems to be the leader. So far.
If there is a leader, yeah.
Yeah,
you're
but
right.
Florida's got the votes.
That's right.
Florida's got the money.
Could be Jeb Bush. He might jump into it.
But some people think I'm not going to predict what the Republicans are going to do.
Right.
I'm just saying why McConnell did well in Kentucky.
Oh, yes, yes.
He organized his state for the party.
Yeah. Well, that gets into things.
And going back to McConnell, he won his first seat in Kentucky in 1984 on Ronald Reagan's landslide. And that's how he got into big-time politics.
Mm-hmm. Now, what was McConnell before he got into politics?
Well, first of all, he was born in Alabama.
Okay.
And his father came to Kentucky in order to make money, and they came to Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
So McConnell gets a good education. He's got the right religion, Southern Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes to the University of Kentucky, and he goes to the University of Louisville, and he becomes a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And he becomes a successful lawyer for the lobbies.
Mm-hmm.
The whiskey lobby, the tobacco, and Kentucky has a strategic location along the Ohio River.
Right.
So they do the commerce between Cincinnati and the Mississippi River, and that's been the strategic importance of Kentucky since the foundation of the Republic.
Yeah, well, Lincoln knew that.
That's right. And they had a very famous senator, Henry Clay.
Oh, yeah.
And Henry Clay knew how to run a balance. His great rival was Jackson from Tennessee. But he played ball with Massachusetts.
Yeah.
And the Whig, and he was the backbone of the Whig Party.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Whig Party were viable in both the North and the South.
Now, Clay was vice president one time, wasn't he?
He was vice president, and he made the very famous statement, "I'd rather be right than president."
Mm-hmm.
He was author of the Missouri Compromise.
That's right. Yep.
Compromise of 1850. He was trying to forestall the Civil War.
Right. Yeah.
By not talking about it. Now, Kentucky didn't have any slaves.
Yes, they
to speak.
no, yeah. Oh, yes, they did.
We had Paducah,
Well, Kentucky was a slave state.
a slave state officially, but they didn't have a large black plantation population.
I want to disagree with you that because
All right, what's the population
of
of
Kentucky.
Kentucky?
I
Well,
can't-
what percent of the Kentucky population are black?
Today or then?
Then,
I have no idea. But I can tell you this. My mother's side of the family, the Webbs, they were slave owners.
how many slaves they had?
I know of two because
2 slaves?
because my at least the way I know they existed was my grandmother talked
Yeah,
about.
it was a slave state.
Yes, and their family did. Now, after abolition and the 14th Amendment, the slaves were freed. Now they became domestic servants.
But when Henry Clay,
Uh-huh.
who was born in Virginia and was a Jeffersonian Democrat,
Mm-hmm.
and he moved into Kentucky in 1799,
Uh-huh.
he had about 6 slaves. They were house slaves.
Yeah.
But there was no cotton.
Well, no, because
There were no big corn, and in other words,
Well,
they went into Louisville became a manufacturing center.
Louisville,
a commerce.
but Kentucky is famous for its tobacco, so it is an agriculture state.
They raised a little bit
Yeah.
of tobacco, but most
There was
of
no
it.
coal mining at that time because no one mined coal.
Okay, so what
Yeah.
are we arguing about now?
Oh, nothing at all. I'm arguing that I'm just stating the historical
was
fact
a- it was a border state. It was a border state.
Kentucky
You
was
think
it was a slave state. They had slaves. It
But
was
they-
legal to have slaves. And Mary Todd Lincoln, when she visited
Right.
Kentucky and saw the actual auctions going on, because right across you have Cincinnati, And on the other side of the river is whatever that town is, where the airport is. Escapes me. There was
Covington.
Covington. There was a slave market. You could go there on a Saturday and buy slaves. And she was very, very offended by that. Now, she knew there were slaves, of course, her family. I don't think Mary Todd Lincoln, the Todds did not have any slaves. At least according to her biography, they didn't. But she was very shocked when she saw the slave market in Covington. And so was Harriet Beecher Stowe, who came across from Cincinnati, went down there and saw the slave markets. That's where she got the inspiration for Uncle Tom's Cabin, which takes place not in Virginia, not in Alabama, not Louisiana or Georgia, but in the great state of Kentucky.
And Kentucky did not secede.
Only because Lincoln put everything he had behind it to make sure that they didn't. But, again, going back to family lore, part of my folks, some of them went for the Confederacy. My dad's side, who were the Risners, they went for the North. They were in the Union.
Okay.
So they had, you know, I can look back at the family rolls and find a couple of guys who had fought here and there and a few other places. Mostly somehow they had a tradition of always knowing where the battle was going to be and never being there. None of them have a medal. There's no heroes, you know.
Okay.
They were just there. So anyway, moving right along.
Okay,
So anyway, here we got good old Mitch. And
Mitch McConnell.
and he's on the make, and he's rising.
And he won in the Senate 6 terms.
Yeah.
He got constantly reelected
Mm-hmm.
because he didn't offend anybody.
No.
He didn't campaign. He just followed the president. He followed on the president's coattails. He didn't disagree with a Republican president.
He was very controversial. Yeah,
And he was not a big, powerful speaker.
No.
So
He was pro-tobacco when there was tobacco to be
and
pro
he
about.
made his money, and
Yep.
he went right along. Anyway, he got elected to Congress, and then so I think you just follow McConnell and just see how he goes along with the presidency.
Yeah.
So Ronald Reagan chose as his vice president George Herbert Walker Bush,
Mm-hmm.
a Texas billionaire,
Yep.
an oil tycoon.
Mm-hmm.
And his son, well, he was the son of Prescott Bush.
Yep.
And so the Republican Party is the party of corporations and money, and Mitch McConnell is no different than the
No.
48 states as far as that goes.
No.
Except that he has Kentucky because he's a Baptist and because he doesn't rock the boat,
Mm-hmm.
and he's a well-educated lawyer,
Mm-hmm.
so he's easy to get reelected.
Yep.
Okay, well, in 1973, Kissinger's now in charge and leaving Vietnam, and Nixon is faced with the Watergate problem, and Kissinger is backing Ford, and Kentucky is not particularly significant at this point.
No, not at all. They have
But-
12 electoral votes?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
minor.
But he's not making any noise.
Right.
When the Democrats win, he just goes and makes money in Louisville. Okay.
Well, that makes sense to me.
And when the Republicans win, then he's going to be a key man in the Senate. That's what we're getting at. He gets on all of the powerful committees.
Yep.
So anyway, when Ronald Reagan won his first term in 1980,
Mm-hmm.
this is where McConnell gets his national reputation. He's easily reelected to the Senate in 1990,
Mm-hmm.
second term, third term, fourth term.
Now, does McConnell have any military record at all?
He went in the Army for 6 months during the Vietnam War. He goes to Fort Knox,
6 months.
6 months.
Okay.
That's what you call inside. Okay, I did my service.
At Fort Knox, guarding the gold?
Well, I don't know what he did at Fort Knox, but he was a lawyer by that time.
Yeah.
He got probably working the Judge Advocates General.
Yeah.
He was able to
Fort Knox, that's armor and gold, so.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he didn't lose anything by that war.
Okay, no.
But he says, I've done my service, and I get a commission. I get a reserve.
No
So
kidding.
he's collecting his salary.
Okay.
So he didn't lose, but they could always say, well, I'm a reserve officer.
I have this medal here, see, for bravery there.
But he knew that the Vietnam War was a loser, and he wasn't going to put his neck out on it.
No.
Well, I'm just going to go back here to Henry Clay and how McConnell studied Henry Clay
Okay.
and saw how Henry Clay was important for Kentucky. And Henry Clay ran for president in 1824,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a tight race.
That was against Polk?
No, that was against John Quincy Adams.
Adams, okay.
And he ran again in 1832, but his big rival was Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
He ran in order to defeat Jackson,
Ah, I see.
not to, and he played ball with the northern politicians
Mm-hmm.
to stop Jackson.
Now, what was his dislike with Andrew Jackson?
Well, Andrew Jackson was a military man.
Right.
Henry Clay was a politician who wanted to avoid the slave North. He wanted to keep the Union together.
Correct.
Jackson was going to campaign on the Solid South.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to get South Carolina,
Right.
North Carolina,
Right.
Virginia,
Yeah.
and and the Jacksonian Democratic Party
Mm-hmm.
was strictly a Southern party. And technically,
Mm-hmm.
Kentucky is a slave state,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no big slave interest there. It's commerce.
Mm-hmm.
It's commerce with Cincinnati, the Ohio River, the North, the
Right.
East, the West, the South.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the strategic importance of getting along with the North,
Right.
okay? Because all of your
Right.
exports are going to come through that river.
Sure.
So he's making money,
Uh-huh.
and then of course, what the American Tobacco Company in Louisville manufactures tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
Most of it's, raised in North Carolina and shipped north. There's a little bit of marginal tobacco there,
Oh, yeah.
but not the big production.
Mm-hmm.
The big production is North Carolina and Virginia and points south.
Right,
Okay.
right.
So they made money in commerce.
Okay. So Clay didn't like Jackson, but Jackson, of course, was a war hero. Battle of New Orleans,
And
Florida,
Right.
Exterminating Indians in Alabama, that
Right,
sort of thing,
right.
which was very popular.
so Clay plays ball with Daniel Webster,
Webster, yeah. Uh-huh.
preserved the Union,
Right.
and he regarded himself as a Westerner.
Well,
This
yeah,
is a Western
that's right.
state.
Yeah, he's on the
Transportation,
he's on the-
canals,
yeah.
federal money for canals.
uh-huh.
That
Yeah.
was-
Internal improvements, I think.
that was it. And keep the Union together. Don't polarize this
Mm-hmm.
North-South thing.
Right.
Okay, because he starts out as a Jeffersonian Democrat.
Right.
When he's in Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
he thinks he had the same lawyer that Jefferson had when he was educated for law. He took his law in an office.
No kidding.
A guy by the name of Wythe.
Ah.
Wythe was the mentor of Jefferson and also Henry Clay.
I'll be darned.
And then in '99 he says, well, Kentucky is a new state,
Mm-hmm.
1798.
So he goes there.
It's
Mm.
most of the people living in Kentucky were simply Daniel Boone types. who
That's right, yeah.
Moved out of Virginia.
Uh-huh, yeah.
They were transplanted Virginians,
Mm-hmm.
Western Virginians,
Right.
not plantation types.
Mm-hmm.
Scots-Irish types.
Yeah.
No big landowners.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Although Henry Clay's father was a Methodist minister, he knew religion, and when he goes to Kentucky, he becomes an Episcopalian. So he's part of the
Oh, okay.
establishment
Mhm. Yeah, right.
of the new Kentucky.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
That's who Henry
Yes.
Clay is.
Okay.
Go with the mainstream. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, he got elected to the Senate in 1848, and he died in office in 1852.
Right. So when he's gone and
when
Daniel
he-
Webster's gone, those great compromisers.
Well, he made his last compromise in 1850,
Mm-hmm.
and then the Civil War was brought on by others,
Yeah, 10 years later.
the Kansas-Nebraska Act, and that was out of his hands.
Right.
And
And then, of course, the Dred Scott decision, that killed it. That destroyed the Missouri Compromise.
That's right.
Right
That's
then and
right.
there.
well, anyway, McConnell, as far as McConnell was concerned, his next best model was Alvin Barkley, a Democratic senator in the Truman era.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember Alvin Barkley? He was the second greatest Kentucky senator.
No, didn't ring a bell.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Fill me in.
He was born in Kentucky, and he got elected to the House of Representatives in 1912 as a liberal Democrat for Woodrow Wilson,
Mm-hmm.
and he supported prohibition. He was opposed to gambling.
He was from Kentucky and he opposed prohibition.
That's right.
So he shut down all the distilleries in
No,
Kentucky.
he supported the 18th Amendment
Okay.
on religious grounds.
Okay.
He was opposed to gambling.
Mm-hmm.
He was a prohibitionist, and he went to the University of Virginia Law School.
Ah, okay.
Okay. And in 1928, he was elected to the Senate. That's who Alvin Barkley is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in 1948, Alvin Barkley was campaigning for Truman,
Mm-hmm.
the guy who was going to lose,
That's right.
as a loyal Democrat.
Mm-hmm.
And he helped Truman get elected in that 1948 election. So he had a lot to say about the Democratic Convention. Okay. So with the election of Eisenhower in 1952, Barkley returns to the Senate. He dropped out of the Senate to campaign for Harry and then went back in. See?
Mm.
So he's a traditional Democrat of the Old South.
Mm-hmm.
He's continuing the Kentucky tradition, continuing the Henry Clay tradition, strategic importance of the river, and the importance of the east-west Mississippi River, Ohio River connection.
Mm-hmm.
So Alvin Barkley is not a deep South Southerner.
No.
He's
He's a border
border
state.
state.
That's
He's a
right.
border state.
Mhm.
Now, Barkley died in office, and Mitch McConnell followed his Republican successor, who was John Sherman Cooper. Do you remember that name?
Yeah.
He's
Cooper.
a Republican, but he's one of your compromised liberal Republicans.
Mhm.
He's not a die-hard Southern segregationist. He'd go along with civil rights. It's not going to bother him any.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So Kentucky follows Texas, follows the votes, and Lyndon Johnson moves in. 63 to 68, Mitch McConnell is getting his BA at that time from the University of Louisville, and then he goes to Kentucky Law School. And then in 67, he joins the Judge Advocate's office, goes to Fort Knox, 6 months, duty, staying out of the war.
Mm-hmm.
Never says anything about the Arab-Israeli crisis. Silent. Not going to bother him. Not going to stick his neck out.
No, nothing to say about that.
That's right. So he's running on the coattails of Reagan in '84.
Mm-hmm.
That's how he rises through power. 84, 90, 96, 2002, fourth term, 2008, fifth term, 2014, his sixth term, and he got his ideal. I'm now majority leader.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in 2014, he wins 56% of the vote against a Democratic woman.
Mm-hmm.
His opponent was Allison Longren Grimes. And here's where the Democrats go with the media. The National Democratic Front is polling for women's votes. Well, it was a great disappointment to the National Party. She only got 41% of the vote.
Mm-hmm.
But the predictions were that this is going to be a close race.
Well,
It wasn't close in the results. So the Democratic National Party exaggerates the power of the 12% black vote, or 13% now. which is much less in Kentucky,
Mm-hmm.
and it exaggerates the women's vote.
Mm-hmm.
And we only got a couple of minutes,
Uh-huh.
and let's finish up on this women's vote.
Okay.
The Democrats won with single women who had to work for a living, young women
Mm-hmm.
who wanted a career, but they didn't win a majority of the women 35, 50 years old who
No.
wanted a marriage.
Mm-hmm.
So she didn't do so well. Allison Grimes didn't do so well among the women as she thought she would.
Right.
A lot of the old-fashioned Baptist women voted for the loyal.
Right, right.
And what does Mitch McConnell? He's got 5 kids.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a wife. He had a second wife, as a matter of fact.
Well, yeah, he
So he's a family man.
absolutely. Well, he's
This is old-fashioned conservatism. Well, I guess we have to stop here, and we'll
okay.
have to continue next time.
All righty. Well,
You want to summarize how McConnell rose from nothing to being
no,
majority leader?
no, I've learned a lot just listening.
You
to
learned
you.
a little bit about Kentucky that you.
Well, I knew
forgot.
more. I knew more about Henry Clay than I did about
Alvin Barkley.
yeah, Barkley. That's for
When did
sure.
your relatives leave Kentucky?
Right after Second World War.
Yeah, came to Ohio.
Came to Ohio. Yeah.
Better choice.
More job opportunities.
Yeah, that's where Butler
Economic,
County is.
yeah.
Butler County are the races from Kentucky.
Yeah, mine was from down in Harlan and
Coal mining country.
coal mining country.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were miners.
That's
yeah,
right.
big in the union movement.
Well, the coals is running out.
Yeah, it is. Well, it's just disappearing.
Yeah. Well, anyway.
But
we-
my Granny Risner, she knew all the Hatfields and the McCoys while they were having their feud, and
But did they vote in Kentucky? Did they ever say anything about voting for Barkley or anything like that? Or
no,
they forgot about that politics.
they were New Deal Democrats.
Well, they probably voted for
Yeah.
Truman and
Yeah.
Barkley.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
They were not Reagan Republicans. Well, anyway,
no.
thanks for coming.
Okay.
We got to keep the
Yep.
debate going.
We will.
Oxygen is
Yeah, debate is the oxygen.
Oxygen is the
Well, debate is the auction of something or other.
of democracy.
Of democracy.
Yeah, we
There.
gotta have oxygen.
Yeah.
To keep this going.
Absolutely.
And that's what's wrong with plutocracy. No debate. We don't want to debate fracking. It's
No.
done deal.
No. Yeah.
Athens County is still debating.
We're still debating. Interesting times. Well, are you following our little